Welcome to Token. We're back. Okay, yeah, we're back. Okay, Steven, what is Token?
Yeah. The Token is a place where your essays will always be read in the most sardonic, satiric way possible.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. So, Steven, Donna, we're back. It's been a minute, but we are back with an interesting one. That's how I feel after this choice. So, Steven and I, and we still will, we wanted to actually talk about like a Black film. So we were going to talk about The Best Man, which is one of Steven's favorite films, which is really awesome. But what we learned is you can't just go, you got to purchase it now on the internet. You can't just, so me and Steven are going to search for our DVDs of The Best Man and try to watch it. But in the meantime, trying to find a film, it was kind of rough. And so I looked, I literally was going through HBO and I was like, oh, French Dispatch, kind of recent. I see in this group of people, there is someone Black. Let's do it. So Steven had seen it. I hadn't seen it. I have my thoughts, but Steven, you saw it in theaters. So I first want like you to give us what the movie's about. And then I would love to hear what you think of the movie overall. And we'll even dive more into the movie overall, but like initial thoughts.
It is okay. So The French Dispatch is Wes Anderson's most recent film, right? It is basically an anthology film. It's a collection of essays that are supposed to be taken from a magazine that's inspired by. It's a fictional magazine that's inspired by the New Yorker, and it is. It's run by Bill Murray's character, who I can't think of at the time, Horowitz, right? And he basically buys a magazine, a Kansas magazine, and then renames it The French Dispatch, and essentially hires like the world's best writers. And each story within the film is based on one of those writers' like lived experiences in France, right? And so it's supposed to take place, I think, between 1925 and like 76 or something, where at the time that his character, Bill Murray's character, is like alive and traveling around France. And it's an interesting film to me because it's all vignettes. It is characteristic Wes Anderson, which, you know, we love. Bright, beautiful colors, very, very specific cinematography with really, really detailed angles and placements and huge. This one's got some really big sets too, and a lot of animation thrown in too, which is really fun and kind of new for Wes Anderson. So my initial impression after leaving the film was actually disappointment. Like I thought it was probably my least favorite film by Wes Anderson because it felt like none of the vignettes had any real points to them. Like there was no real story arcs in them. It was just it's like collected essays, but it didn't look like it was a like they had real character growth or change or anything within them, right? And I still stand by that. I don't think any of the characters really have any change or growth. I think they're just little vignette stories, but I do see arcs in them now after rewatching it, but I still don't, there's still no real character changes, right? It's just like entertaining stories and within each one. And it's really, none of them are really even about Bill Murray's character, the publisher of the magazine. He's just there as kind of like the driving force. But each story itself within the magazine has, you know, some of the best actors of this generation, right? Every imaginable face that you can think of that you're like, oh, I love that person. I love that person. I love that person. They're all in here, all of them, right? It's just that it was not, to me, the one thing that Wes Anderson's movies usually have is not just whimsy and charm, but also there's a little bit of a heart in there. Usually one of the characters is the character that gives you that heartful connection. But I just didn't find that in this one. And so that's I think why I didn't like it as much the first go around. This one rewatching it, I saw deeper into the story. So I noticed things I didn't notice before, which gave me a better appreciation for them. But I still feel like there's no real character. You can't go into this looking for characters that grow or change or that you're going to be endeared to. It's just a collection of fascinating like scenes and stories to watch, you know.
Yeah, no, I think I watching it while I was watching the movie. So I saw a film recently and I had a reaction to it. And then my friend had a reaction to it that was like, oh my God, that was beautiful. That was this, that was this. And so I have been kind of in the mindset that I have been having McDonald's for movies. I've been eating the McDonald's movies. No offense, Marvel, but I've been watching a lot of Marvel films. And so I was like, I've been eating like the McDonald's of movies. So maybe like I'm out of like shape when it comes to eating like the gourmet meals, the art films and stuff like that. And I felt that way about not this one, but the other film I saw. I felt that way. Like I'm actually just really out of touch with like films that like are not at like a
Nourish you.
traditional like blockbuster movie pace and things like that.
So
So when I was
you've
watching
been
this,
so I want to reframe this. So in other words, you've been watching a lot of films that are filling and entertaining and taste good, but they don't nourish you. They don't help you
yes.
grow.
Yeah. And so I've been like, oh, maybe my taste is just like really off. Like I haven't been on my like art film game in a little bit. So when I was watching this, I'm like, dang, maybe I'm off my art film game. Like because I honestly, first of all, another initial reaction was Wes Anderson got money. You hear me? These sets, the
Mhm.
coloring. This film is probably what, 70, 75, 80% black and white.
A good chunk of it is,
A
yeah.
good
I'd
chunk,
say
basically
75%,
basically
75%.
a huge amount of this is black and white, but every once in a while it shows you in color, and these colors are so beautiful,
Mhm.
so rich, so amazing, and it's just like, wow, like you have that money where you're like, we're going to show you the majority of it in black and white, but like when the colors come, you're going to be like, why are we in black and white? Anyway, but yeah, I think I agree with you. I felt really disappointed by it. um and this is just talking about like the film overall. I
Mhm.
felt unfortunately it felt like a chore to watch the film for me. i
Mhm.
think I do think um of the vignettes, I would say the most entertaining is Jeffrey Wright's characters. For me, Vignette, who is our only black character in this film. um but yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head. Like there isn't like a connecting storyline throughout all the stories except Bill Murray's character, but none of the things are about Bill Murray, which is weird because it starts off with his death, and so you think like it's going to be like an exploration of him. You would think what it should have been was an exploration of him throughout these written stories that people did, right? And the only time you kind of see that is in Jeffrey Wright's character, whose character's name is also something I don't remember. Right.
Roebuck, right?
Right. Yeah, like it's same last name,
Yeah.
which kind of makes me think like potentially they wrote this part and like had him in mind the whole time. Um, but that's the only time in their stories that you see also Bill Murray like play a role. And like because his whole story is like Bill Murray like gave him a chance. We'll talk more about it, but overall I felt a little disappointed about it. It felt like a chore to watch it. As always, it was absolutely beautiful, and had great moments. It's always fascinating to watch his pieces and how he puts it together. Like he is an author of his pieces. But I will say this: did you notice he had some shots that reminded me of Spike Lee?
Oh yeah, some of the what's it called, the moving dolly shots,
I didn't even notice that. I was talking about the composition shots where he has like a lot of characters in one frame.
oh yeah, where they're
That's
crammed into the frame, all
Yes, that's
looking at the
very
camera.
Spike Lee.
Oh
Like
yeah,
when to me it reminded me of like a lot of his films. Like specifically, I kept on thinking about School Days
hmm hmm
and how like he would do the shots in School Days of like all the people. He'll stagger and have bunch, like that's a thing that Spike Lee
yeah,
does. I think another film that I can point out, I think Do the Right Thing does it,
oh
but
yeah,
it
dude.
reminded me of something that Spike Lee did. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, that looks like Spike Lee. And that's weird to say that in a Wes Anderson film, right? Because Wes Anderson always has his thing, but that was the first time I watched this film and I was like, oh, that reminds me of Spike Lee. So that was interesting. But yeah, I was disappointed. But let's get into our token. Jeffrey Wright's character.
Yes.
First of all, we have reviewed a Wes Anderson film before. One of my favorites, The Royal Tenenbaums. And I remember then we said Wes Anderson does lazy diversity. And also for someone who literally, like Steven said, every shot you saw is every actor you could think of is in this film, but the Black actors.
And when I first looked at the box cover again, I was like, are there no people of color on this at all? And I totally forgot Jeffrey Wright was even in it until I went back to look at the cast itself. And I was like, oh yeah, his story is in there. But the box cover alone, I don't even know if he's on the box cover. I have to double check.
He's on the box cover, but because he light skin, he kind of blends in with the sea of white. The absolute sea. Wes Anderson gathered 100 people and one of them was Black. I don't get it. What is wrong with him?
You're not lying.
It's upsetting.
The only you're not lying. The only other Black person I saw in this was that I remember noticing was one of the policemen during that
chess game.
The chess game story. Yeah. And he was dark, and that was it. That was like
the only Black people he had in there were dark-skinned chocolate back people, and they weren't main characters. They were always the one in the room, which feels like he's trolling us. Like he's like, oh, I'm gonna put one Black person in here and I'm gonna make them where they stand out in this black and white more than anything. That's literally it. Because I saw a time when Jeffrey Wright's character was walking through the scenes, there's like a boxing scene that he walks through, and it's literally all white men boxing and one chocolate Black man.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. I was thinking it was just lazy, like we'll throw this guy in here.
No,
but
it's
that's an interesting way to look at it, like because I know composition and color are a big part of his cinema, his filming style. But I wonder if that has something to do with it now. If the chocolatey brother is there specifically for the composition and the look to go with it.
You know what? I wouldn't, because it's like I could see him being like, oh, we need to put someone Black in here. Oh, but make sure they're really chocolate. Like I want to really see them pop in the black and white. So it's like you've made it even more obvious that you're such a lazy diversity person. Mm-hmm. By like every Black person there was, you have there was no skin tone variation with any Black people that were in the background. And there's only one of them in each scene. Yeah. Literally one. The only skin variation is Jeffrey Wright. And that's probably because he's the lead and he casted him for that lead role, which I think he had him in mind because the character's name is even his last name. He's just trash. Like, what is going on with Anderson? Does he not have no Black friends? Is he just never around anyone Black? Because he seems like a guy who wants a ton of people in his films, yet he never finds anyone Black. He don't even consistently book Black people back to back. You couldn't get homeboy. Who was our token in Royal Tenenbaums?
Danny Glover.
They couldn't put Danny Glover in this? Too many?
Or even Donald Glover for that matter, right?
Donald Glover would be perfect for Wes Anderson.
He would have been great with Wes Anderson.
Anyone in Atlanta would be perfect for Wes Anderson. Like these are like actors. Like there are Black Denzel
would be good too.
Because he literally casts everyone who is from all genres of white.
Yeah, but
do this.
Nobody, like, I wonder if he just hangs out with certain groups of people and is not rolling with anybody that's, because I was reading that he did meet Jeffrey Wright in a cafe when he was pitching him the role in Paris.
What'd I say? He had that role written for him. I knew it.
Well, So the story is that the reason he made this movie is because he grew up reading the New Yorker, right, and was like obsessed with it. So it's a love letter to the New Yorker, basically. And so all those the writers in the New Yorker became like some of his favorite writers. And a lot of the old school writers from the New Yorker are like some of the most famous writers in the world. So he wanted to write Jeffrey Wright's character Roebuck, right, in like as an inspiration between AJ Liebling, who was the food critic for the New Yorker for like during the 60s, and James Baldwin, right? And I was wondering because I was like, why didn't they do like a really specific James Baldwin type character for this? And I realized after rewatching it, oh, that's who Jeffrey Wright's character is kind of supposed to be inspired by. He's supposed to be a gay black man that's a writer, but also in this case, a food critic specifically, which is where the AJ Liebling, who wasn't black, comes in. And so he, I guess, supposed to be a mix between those two and Tennessee Williams. And he's
Jesus, a lot of people to be balancing.
yeah, I know.
You're Tennessee
But
Williams and James Baldwin and Ling Ling. What?
And I did see that a lot of the James Baldwin in there after I rewatched it, like even without reading about it. But after I rewatched it, I was like, oh, you know what? I see he is supposed to be James, like, because like that opening scene where they have him being interviewed by Liev Schreiber on stage, it's supposed to be taken from that opening scene for Not Your Negro, where James Baldwin was interviewed on the Dick Cavett show in '68, which opens the documentary for Not Your Negro, right? You can see the setting, the seating, the arrangement, all that's supposed to look just like it. So he's very clearly supposed to be a James Baldwin type character, but like his own, because all the characters in here are supposed to be fictionalized, but based on real writers. And so, and they did make it clear that he was like a gay black man, right? When he says that he's when he's opening and narrating his own story, and he's like cartography is the one weakness like a homosexual man has, right? Like can't find a way around places. And then later on he gets arrested specifically for the crime of quote love, right? Ironically enough, not for being black, because I guess because he's in Paris at the time, black people didn't have the same exact struggles as black people in America here, which is one of the reasons we know Baldwin escaped to Paris and enjoyed it so much. But he got arrested for being gay. And that's where he calls Bill Murray's character to come bail him out, right? And so it's interesting. So they do make that clear, and I thought it was interesting that they also brought up when they cut back to the interview, the original interview with Liev Schreiber's character, he tells him that he says like, you've written about the American Negro, the French intellectual, the Southern romantic. And then he cuts the conversation, and or Roebuck Wright's character cuts him off there and says, AKA like the anti-Negro, right? The Southern romantic is the anti-Negro, which I thought was actually a really good point to make, to have his character especially make. And I guess to reinforce his like black intellectualism for that role. And then he goes on to say, you've written about, mythology, folklore, blah, 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 blah. And he wanted to ask him why he was a food writer or whatever. So, and then I think that whole goes into like his loneliness. Because I think the theme of his specific story is supposed to be loneliness, and how food writer is lonely, but the food and the kitchens they cook in are the kitchens that cook the food that they eat are kind of like supposed to replace the kitchens of home. And so, but a food writer's job is kind of a lonely job, as they bounce around the world and just eat by themselves and make new families out of every restaurant owner or the people they meet at the restaurants. And I guess that's supposed to also kind of be paralleled with Baldwin when he was in Paris, because he met a lot of famous French authors and philosophers and artists because he worked out of the cafes a lot, right? And so like Jean-Paul Sartre and all these other people. So so I think that's supposed to have the parallels that he's written in his character, which actually, after rewatching it, I give him more credit than I did originally, because I see much more of the Baldwin parallels in the second go around than I did the first go around. But he's still like, being the only character there, you just can't help but wish there was at least one more that really had a good solid role in one of these, any one of the stories, right? Even the Young French Revolutionaries one, they could have been one, you know, it would have been dope. But his story is my favorite one too. Originally, I liked the story that Benicio del Toro had the most because it was the most clear through line to me. It was also the longest story, but I felt like it was the most clear arc, clear story. But after rewatching this one, I think there's much more deeper themes and tones in Jeffrey Wright's story.
Yeah. And what's crazy, I agree. I think his Jeffrey Wright story was the most nuanced. And I would even say that the things that make it nuanced, I think a big bulk of his story wasn't even with him in it. It was of telling about how this little kid got kidnapped and then recovering him. But even of that, his story, like when it was like about him, it just had more colors. Like we actually were getting to know like this character, and I don't feel like from the other ones we got to know the writers as much.
Yeah.
A little bit, but like not in a way that was as intriguing, I feel, as his. And I do think that piece where the chef, who is Asian, the only Asian man in this entire film, other than like the other cooks that were like assisting him, who don't have lines, who are just there like the rest of the Black people, just backstage pieces. When he's laying there and him and Jeffrey Wright's character have this moment of knowing what it feels like to be an outsider, and also like talking about having to perform for acceptance. Because remember, he ate the poisonous thing and he said, "Oh, you're brave." And he says, I don't want to be brave. I wasn't trying to be brave. I was trying not to be a disappointment. I'm already an outsider. And so I thought if I didn't do that, literally kill himself almost, that I would be ostracized in a way. And him and Jeffrey Wright's character say, well, that's something we can bond on, the fact that like we know what it's like to be an outsider within these communities and these worlds. And I thought was really interesting for them to like point that out, and like they're literally outsiders within this film. You know what I mean? It just it's upsetting. It's like Wes Anderson creates these worlds and he shoots it in a fantastical, out of the box way where he can create whatever he wants. And it's just like, you have all of this and you never make the decision to create a world that looks more diverse, that has more people. Like he just doesn't make that decision, and I feel like sometimes, when they do have one Black character, I feel like they're cramming every single thing into one character. Like literally they made Jeffrey Wright's character like every single thing, like you're playing 3 characters, all of this, but it's just like you miss out on the colors that having Black characters in your film bring, because I actually feel like the way that he wrote some of the things was that they definitely acknowledged that he was Black in this world. I think they even under acknowledged it, actually. I think they acknowledge it, but I think they even under acknowledge it in a way. I think it could have been even more so brought out, especially because he's in such white worlds. So I thought it was interesting. I definitely thought his storyline was the best. I just think I feel repeatedly like disappointed by Wes Anderson's handling of diversity within his pieces. And it's like in this piece you had the bit of diversity, and that was literally the most like poignant, touching and beautiful thing about the film. So that's my thoughts.
I think I agree. I think that conversation he has with the chef, who's I guess he's a police chef, right? Lieutenant Nescaffier.
Why they got them working for police too?
He's a police
Come
chef.
on. Why Jeffrey Wright got to be in prison? Why the white man got to save him in prison?
I'll give it to him. It was an interesting way to put that in. See, if I think it would have underscored him being Black if he got arrested for the crime of love. But I think if Bill Murray brought up in the discussion was probably also because you're an outsider, right? Because you're black, right?
Mhm.
If Bill Murray brought that up too, because that would have made the clear 1-2 punch. It would almost be like that scene in Green Book, right?
Oh, I never
Like
seen
you're,
it, but
oh wow, it's you should see it, and we'll have a discussion on that too, definitely. But you get arrested for the crime of love, but also really because you're black, right? Even in Paris, in the 60s, yes. Just not necessarily as much as like in here in the South. But so I think there were opportunities to underscore his blackness, right? Especially if they went into like the food he was used to eating, like if there was a certain food there in France, like a meal that the chef cooked that was reminiscent of meals he ate back home or something, right? There's ways they could have underscored it.
Mhm.
I do think the conversation he had with Nescaffier at the end was probably the most poignant scene in the film,
Yep.
because that conversation about them both, the fact that they were both outsiders and both wanted to feel a place to feel at home and to feel accepted, and both ended up in France there, and learning that like they both being foodies, basically learning that like their home is wherever they're at, and that the people that are cooking the meals, that they're sharing the meals with, end up being substitute families. I thought that was the most poignant part of the film, and I think it was really reflective of the character in a great way to literally show that they're outsiders, but also metaphorically speak on being an outsider and what an outsider is like. And I think that just shows that he can write these characters and do them justice if he wants to, but he just doesn't seem to have gone through the thought process of deciding like that's something he wants to do. Right.
So sad. It's so sad because Wes Anderson is so talented, and we saw glimpses of like how he can bring such a beauty and a nuance to these type of characters, yet he just decides not to.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm wondering, like, I don't fucking know why this new movie he's got coming out, Asteroid something.
How many black people in it? Count
I don't even know. That's what I was gonna say. I'm hoping.
one. Or he gonna revert back like our boy Christopher Nolan and have straight white folks in the entire film.
Asteroid City is the name of it. So it'll be a romantic comedy.
And
And I
go ahead.
I get that he likes to work with the same crew. Every one of these actors, directors, writer directors, loves working with the same crew. I get that, but it's like expand your crew a little bit to
Well, he does. He does it amongst the white people. He had homegirl. He had a lot of new people in this. That's the thing. He had a lot of new people in this, and it's just like when you're making those decisions, you only have room for one of us. He does that. He re-ups all the time. He adds people all the time. It's just he doesn't consistently add black people. Like it kind of feels like an afterthought, honestly.
Interesting, because there'll always be a couple Asians, which include South Asians, right? Like what I think Tony Rivolori, right? But who was in Grand Budapest Hotel, and actually, or is he Hispanic? See, I don't even know. Let me double check.
He was in here, but he had a bit part. He didn't even talk.
Yeah, he had a bit part. He had a bit part, and he was in Grand Budapest. He was in Grand Budapest. He was in this one.
Was he in A Life Aquatic?
Was he on Life Aquatic? I don't think he was on Life Aquatic. But wait, no, he wasn't in Life Aquatic. Who was?
They had somebody in Life Aquatic. I can't remember.
They did. I have to go back to the cast, but yeah, he's actually Guatemalan. So they'll be like South Asian,
But it's still just one.
but yeah,
Like 50,000 white folks.
Yeah, which is honestly, it just sucks because he makes good films, right? He makes fun films. He makes charming, quirky, whimsical films that you that you like to return to for multiple reasons, but we're just not in there, right? Except one character, right? I think because even in Life Aquatic, there's the one Brazilian Black character that's always just singing David Bowie songs in Portuguese in the background.
In the background. That's where
Right.
we are. Yeah, so that was disappointing. I personally thought the film was a little boring. It felt torturous to watch it, and it's only an hour and 47 minutes.
Mhm.
Longest hour 47 minutes of my life. I'm being mean. I will say Wes Anderson still has a beautiful film. I still love the movement of it, but like of his films, this isn't like one of my favorites, and I absolutely love him. So 1 to 10, what would you give this?
A 6, primarily because the rewatch value is entertaining because the sets and the actors, right? Like those two, he really never fails at, and that keeps the movie rewatchable to a point. Apparently, no matter how like boring or just how unstructured it is, right? Because at this point, I've been able to rewatch probably any of his films and feel like I'm watching it new all over again every time I rewatch it. But this one, I did see new things when I rewatched this one for the second time, but it didn't pull me in or give me that heart that I gotten from the other ones.
Yeah, I agree. I would give it like a 5 or like 5 to 6. I think that's where, I think strength as a filmmaker, he's always very strong, but just story wise. And it's crazy because I was reading reviews and like people like really loved it. And I was just like, but like the way they were talking about it was kind of in the way of like, you don't understand. Like
Yeah,
like describing what was meant to happen as a result of this or what it means for Wes Anderson to write it and stuff like that. But like never I feel really like diving into like the enjoyment ability of watching it.
yeah. Same. I only read one or two reviews that actually didn't like it, but everybody else was like really in love with it. And I think it's at the point. I think it's because at this point, Wes Anderson can do no wrong in most people's eyes. So a lot of people are just like, "Oh, this
He
is doing a
can.
great thing."
He needs some black folks. He needs something.
I
He
said
needs a
most people.
rainbow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
But
exactly.
yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I didn't yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about? Add?
No, man. I think we covered everything that I had to say about it, really, which was primarily that the one token we did have in here, he did a good job with. Just should have reinforced and done more.
Yeah, he was good. All right, Stephen, where could they find us? I know Instagram, YouTube, Spotify,
Hmm.
um,
And
iTunes.
iTunes. And honestly, I don't know about Google Podcasts. We should probably double check that.
We'll double check that. But if this is your first time here, go check out our past episodes. Also, if you're first time here, if you have any movie suggestions, we're always looking for suggestions. And that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Peace out.
Later.